All right, welcome back, everyone, to our next session. And it's going to be very difficult for me to introduce our next speaker because her biography reads like a book. So you'll have to look her up on Wikipedia. But our speaker for the next session is none other than Leslee Udwin. I think her accomplishments as a filmmaker are already legend. But I think what's more legend for me, and I think everybody at Learning Curve, is an astounding sort of journey and transition into the world of bringing social emotional learning in such a beautiful manner to the early years. And every time we've had a conversation with Leslee, we've come away completely energized. The kind of dogged determination that she has in making sure this happens is just completely beyond compare. So, Leslee, the floor is all yours. Please tell us more. And we have a very special announcement coming up at the end of the session with me and Leslie. So, Leslie, the floor is all yours.
So good morning, everyone. Namaste. Aap sabika swagat hai. I'm really honored to be with you here this morning. Ye mera saubhagya hai. I'm going to start off by asking a framing question for this session. And it's a question that I ask every education minister and policymaker who I encounter in my work to bring about a system change in education, which is what my work is all about. And particularly policymakers in early years education. The question is this: how can we, who have a duty of care to our youngest citizens, I'm going to pause a moment because I've just had notification that my video is off. So let me get back in to find the right button. Yes, indeed. I'm so sorry, everyone. At least I hope you've heard my greeting and letting you know absolutely how honored I feel to be joining Learning Curve and all of you. So I'm going back now to the question that I said I wanted to have as the framing question for this conversation that we're having. The question is this: we who have a duty of care to our youngest, most vulnerable citizens, how can we deem it to be compulsory for those children to learn numeracy and literacy, but it's optional for them to learn how to value another human being, how to have self-esteem, how to be a responsible global citizen, and how to lead healthy relationships? It's a rhetorical question, of course. Gandhi said, if we are to achieve real peace in this world, we shall have to start with the children. And I believe that with all of my heart. It is mindset change that is needed to bring about the safe, free, and equal world which we all dream of, but which is so sadly elusive, and I'm afraid getting more and more so. This is the only way that it can be achieved, is by a foundational early years education. I came to this, my life's mission, pretty late in life, I'm sad to say. I started off as a filmmaker, as Subbu mentioned, and for the last film I made, which was a documentary about a savage and brutal gang rape and murder of an extraordinary young woman, I interviewed rapists and murderers in jail for 31 hours. I sat and looked into their eyes in my inquiry as to what human beings these were. What kind of human being can do this to another human being? One of the rapists I interviewed had raped a 5-year-old girl. And he was very clear about what entitled him, in his terms, entitled him to do that. And I'm going to quote to you, word for word, exactly what he said to me in justifying his actions. She was a beggar girl, he said. Her life was of no value, word for word what he said. He told me this without a hint of remorse or regret. Her gender and her caste made him feel entitled to take that little person, do whatever he wanted with her, and then toss her aside a little heap of bloodied rags. Now, we label these perpetrators monsters, and we do that in order to distance ourselves from them. But the truth is, the sobering truth is that not one of the men I sat with and interviewed was a monster. I wish they had been in some senses. It would have been much more reassuring. But no, these were ordinary, normal young men who had been programmed like robots by socio-cultural thinking with attitudes that allow and, yes, even encourage them to do what they did. And in case you think I'm overstating the case, let me tell you, word for word, what one of these rapists, actually more of the rapists said the same in different ways, but the clearest it was said to me was by one of the rapists, and it was this. She was out after dark. She was with a man who was neither her husband nor her brother. She not only deserved what she got, but we had a duty to teach her a lesson. That, my friends, is socio-cultural thinking at work, actively expressed. There's not one corner of this earth that is free of this disease. It just expresses itself in differing ways and to differing degrees, country by country. Whether it's the rape of 1 in 4 girls on college campuses in America, a country which hasn't even yet ratified the Equal Rights Amendment Act, or the fact that 96% of women in Egypt are genitally mutilated, or that in the UK, where I live, 1 in 3 girls between the ages of 13 and 17 have experienced sexual violence. And it goes on and on and on ad infinitum. In fact, the more it goes on, the more we become inured to it. It ceases to shock us anymore. So it gets normalized. This is a cycle of discrimination and violence. And how are we responding? Well, we're dealing reactively with the fallout to all of this. We're putting plasters on wounds instead of tackling it at its root. So I want us today to consider a missing and critical parallel path, a path of prevention and intervention, and especially at the crucial early year stages when these boys, when all of our children are developing their feelings, their thinking, their character, their moral compass, around the age of 3 to 6. That is when neuroscientists tell us the brain architecture is developing. And what we do at Think Equal with the program we've designed is we co-construct pro-social, positive, loving, empathetic neuropathways in the developing brain of our children. This is when the brain is optimally modifiable between the ages of 3 and 6. Now, obviously, up to 3, development is even more intense. But for 2 reasons, we don't start below 3. First of all, a child's sense of identity and moral responsibility actually begin around 3. And secondly, we need to reach children at scale. Well, how are we going to get into the homes under the age of 3? It would be an unrealistic ambition. So this early years window is when attitudes and behaviors can be changed. Where are the educators, I want to know, who are teaching these children that each and every one of us is of equal value? And I'm not talking just about gender here. I'm talking about the whole range of inequalities that are expressed as the symptoms of the disease of an unequal mindset. I believe with all my heart that the only way to end this cycle of violence is to end the discriminatory mindset that is the root cause of it all. To think equal. And that is why this is the name of the initiative and organization, the charity that I have founded and am committing the rest of my life to. When men feel superior to women, violence and abuse follow. When so-called white people, I'm not white. Why do I say so-called? Because if I were white, then this would match me. It doesn't. So when so-called white people feel superior to people of color, we're all people of color, violence and oppression result. When one nationality or tribe feels itself superior to another or becomes obsessed with nationalism, it ends in war and destruction and prosecution, or persecution, forgive me, persecution of people who are deemed to be unnationalistic. When one religion feels it is superior to another, then even religions which claim to be about peace and love end up as violent oppressors of the most vicious kind. Nelson Mandela said, "Education is the most powerful weapon we have to change the world." And here's what he meant by education. No child is born hating another human being. Because of the color of his skin, his religion, or any other background, a child has to be taught to hate. And if he can be taught to hate, then he can be taught to love. Education is the primary engine of progress. But when we consider how completely and irresponsibly we, our governments and their structures, our policymakers, have been ignoring the holistic nature of education, we really should hang our heads in shame. We are letting our children down. We are neglecting our children. We've considered education to be limited to numeracy and literacy and testing, preparing our children to be cogs in the machine of the labor market, because that is what we have come to value, the accumulation of wealth above all else. That is the real scourge. Here is what Gandhi had said directly about education. And it's a complete mirror to the insights that I gleaned from my 2.5-year journey making that documentary I mentioned earlier, which changed my life and my path. Gandhi said, "By education, I mean an all-round drawing out of the best in child and man, body, mind, and spirit. Literacy is not the end of education, not even the beginning. It is one of the means whereby men and women can be educated. Literacy in itself is no education, said Gandhi. He also said, the real difficulty is that people have no idea of what education truly is. We assess the value of education in the same manner as we assess the value of land or of shares in the stock exchange market. We want to provide only such education as would enable the student to earn more. We hardly give any thought to the improvement of the character of the educated. The girls, we say, do not have to earn, so why should they be educated? As long as such ideas persist, there is no hope of our ever knowing the true value of education, let alone coming near to a responsible execution of it. How has it not occurred to us when designing the education we will nurture and prepare our children with that they need to be taught experientially and with practice, empathy and respect for others, emotional intelligence, self-regulation, the value of each and every human being. In short, social and emotional learning, the foundation that is required for human rights, for peace and prosperity to thrive. So during the first 5 years of life, children build the key social and emotional skills that profoundly influence the rest of life's outcomes. That is why social and emotional learning in the early years is the best form of social investment we can make. Think Equal is a call for a system change in education. It adds a new and missing subject onto the compulsory curricula of world schools. And it calls for this subject to be taught from the earliest possible years in daycare centers and early years settings of all types. Think Equal has gathered thought leaders, visionaries in education, in gender, in human rights, in psychology, neuroscience, experts who have helped us over the past 3.5 years to design, construct, and deliver a program as a global resource for educating the hearts of the world's children and not just their heads. In the 3 years since its inception, Think Equal has created the world's first comprehensive curriculum in social and emotional learning with 3 levels for 3 to 6-year-olds to be taught over 3 years of 30 weeks each level, 3 times a week, 30 minutes each lesson, with 90 lesson plans each year, which means a total of 270 lesson plans over the 3 years, 80 narrative books over the 3 years, which we've created, which don't have a single man with a briefcase in a suit or woman working in the kitchen, or girl in pink or boy in blue, etc. And more than 150 accompanying resources. We teach 25 competencies and skills, all of which we say are crucial because they are that holistic education that Gandhi and indeed Mandela have spoken of, and the Convention on the Rights of the Child and the Human Rights Declaration all talk about the need for a holistic education. We've just never put it into practice ever before. Can you imagine that? We've spoken about it for more than 80 years, for 2 centuries, actually, if you count Aristotle saying education of the head without education of the heart is no education at all. Pretty irresponsible. So it's 25 competencies and skills that we teach, which range from gender and racial and religious equality to environmental stewardship, peaceful conflict resolution, inclusion, global citizenship. These are just a few of the 25 I'm mentioning. And they are taught directly, head-on, and prescriptively, which is very important. The lesson plans are prescriptive, and they have to be, because you tell me how we're going to suddenly educate a workforce of teachers fast enough to not keep on letting children between 3 and 6 escape this window of modifiability, when we've treated our teachers in the early years as the bottom of the heap. They are the most important teachers in the whole of the journey at school. And we've underpaid them, under-respected them, under-trained them because we've considered them to be mere babysitters. How insane. How stupid. We're currently implementing the program in 16 countries. We're with 94,000 children to date. And in February, we're doubling that number in one fell swoop in the Eastern Cape of South Africa, where we're going in one go because it's scalable, replicable, prescriptive. We're able to do this. And we are giving this program in partnership with the government of the Eastern Cape, the Education Department of the Eastern Cape, to every single 5-year-old in the whole province. The Eastern Cape is the second largest and second poorest province in the whole of South Africa. We're in 6 continents. And we're in so-called developed countries as well as developing countries. And I say so-called because genuinely I don't believe there's a single developed country in this world. Evidence of the last few days, bear this statement out quite dramatically, I would have thought. We have major global partnerships by now. Example with Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, Montessori, UNICEF, UNESCO, the Pope. Genuinely a partnership with the Pope. I've met him 5 times now. We're working very, very closely with him and his Global Compact for Education. The Institute for Healthy Minds at Wisconsin-Madison University, the UN. We have to commit, in closing, we have to commit at last to educating our children to embrace equality and mutual respect. We have to focus on breaking the cycle of gender stereotypes and value judgments of all kinds. And we must do this from the first on a compulsory, formal basis. We owe this to Gandhiji's memory, to Mandela's memory. We owe this, much more importantly, to the legations. I assume we have questions now. I hope so.
Yes, Leslie. After that, I think I expect to see some stunned silence in the audience, but I certainly expect a few questions. Any questions, thoughts that you'd like to share? Asking the audience.
I have a question. Whose dog? Is it yours, Sabu? I have a question. I said, whose dog? Is it yours?
Sounds like our dog, yes.
Sounds sweet.
Yes. So waiting for questions. Anybody to?
Or make some comments.
Or make some comments, yeah.
Yeah.
Make some comments. Leslie, you have stunned our audience into silence.
I hope not. Or at least if silence, I hope I've not stunned them into inaction, because we need every single one of you to join this movement and to help to roll this out in the world.
I think you've stunned us into silence, but not into inaction for sure.
Good.
Sonia, I think you said you can't get your mic going. Okay. There is a question. There is a question there from Anjali Sharma, who's the Charter for Compassion India Education Lead. She says, who I know is also one of Think Equal's partners. I'll say, thank you, Leslie, for such an insightful session. I'm all inspired. Would like to know why only 3 to 6 years is the focus area of the Think Equal program, and do you have programs post that? So that's one for you, Leslie. Go for it.
Okay. Anjali, I'm not surprised you asked me that. And I have to confess, I irritate a lot of people by saying 3 to 6 and being so dogged about it. I mean, to some degree, I would normally say, forgive me for that doggedness. I'm always completely honest. So I express myself exactly as I feel it. But in this case, I don't ask for pardon for that doggedness, because this is pure and simple neuroscience. Not a neuroscientist in this world will tell you that above the age of 6, you can put in a foundational intelligence. You can't. Not in terms of social emotional learning. Facts, yes. Hearing, sight, they all continue to develop. But in terms of habits, habitual ways of responding, emotional control, truly, it flatlines the ability to fundamentally change, flatlines on graphs at 6. And I wish it were other, but it's not. Those are the facts. So we've been ignoring the very basis. It's like an architect. What architect would build a building from the ground floor up without a foundation? That skyscraper would fall down within a couple of years. Now, after 6, of course, change is possible, but it needs to have what has been learned, unlearned, and relearned. Why would we do that? Why would we have to unpick the wiring, the hard wiring in the brain of the neuro pathways that have been formed in order to have to reform them? Why wouldn't we just start from the beginning? Do you know how much this program costs? When you look at it over, because it's a one-off cost, it's about training the teachers, providing the materials. We never allow our teachers or our schools to pay for the materials. We raise the money in order, because we say it's a fundamental right of every child. And we do not want just the rich schools to end up, who can afford the materials, to end up teaching it. So we spend, I mean, I literally, you can hear I'm hoarse, right? Because I work 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. I'm obsessed with this. That's why 3 to 6, I don't have much time. Look at me. I don't have much time left to achieve this mission. So sure, it would be great to continue to teach the 7, 8, 9-year-olds. It's critically important to do that. But there are brilliant people. Look, Learning Curve is doing that brilliantly. Why should we repeat what they're doing? You know, we don't need to invent the wheel. But you tell me who is dealing with the early years. Very, very few. And those who are, sadly, are not yet doing it with that range of competencies and skills that we believe are needed. I've partly answered your question very fully because of feeling that there may not be any other questions. But Subbu, have any emerged while I've been talking? Any others? Subbu, I can't hear you. You're on mute, Subbu.
Yes, I've done that a couple of times today, strangely enough. So yeah, there are a couple of questions that have come on our YouTube live stream. Somebody by name Anamika Srivastava asks, how can we smash patriarchy and break gender stereotypes?
Easy. So easy to do. I mean it. The only way we can do it is in the way I've just described, by starting with the next generation. We would need to take adults who have already been programmed like robots, as I described. We would need to take those adults into therapy for many years to achieve that. It's not realistic. Who's going to pay the trillions of dollars to take all of us who were not educated with this consideration and love and nurturing? Who's going to take us into therapy? Nobody, right? We're kind of stuck with who we are. But the next generation, why should we let them go forth with this patriarchy, these stereotypes, when it's so easy to simply at the right time co-construct these neuro pathways so that they're equal? You know, we have tools, we have exercises that teach our children that every single human being, regardless of their gender, regardless of their race, regardless of their color, every single one of us are equal. You are the other me and I am the other you, and that is what our children learn. So that is how we can do it. And I've seen it with my own eyes, believe me. Since January 2017, when we started our first pilots, and we're now with several thousands of schools. I mean, I've seen it. It's easy. I've seen it happen within 4 months, let alone the 3 years that we have the program for. Subbu, the next question.
Okay, we have time for one more. I have two interesting questions here. One is from Monal from Kemalia, but we all know Monal, so we can answer that question separately. But I also have another question here. Monal, sorry about this. I know you'll hate me for this, but I'm going to.
Monal, I will answer your question by email, and actually, I make that offer. Oh, please. Not too many, because I've got deadlines today, but I will. I promise you. And if you're patient, it may take a couple of days, but I will answer any question you have by email.
We'll copy that question. So yeah, requesting somebody to copy the question. But there's one question coming in from Devki Purohit from Deshpande Foundation. How do we nullify or temper the conflicting messages a child gets outside of the school setting? Perhaps more influential coming from a person in power, maybe.
No, that's not true. What is influential is what is happening in the brain. Now, I completely agree with you, and I wish to God we did not have to contend with those influences at home which are going to try to reverse the learning. But they will not be able to, and I'll tell you why. It's not rocket science, it's neuroscience. And it's absolutely simple. You build a neuro pathway, you use it, you repeat it, and that's exactly how our program is designed, because we've had the world's top neuroscientists involved in helping us design it. So all these lessons are scaffolded. That is the one thing we insist with our teachers. We make them sign an undertaking that they're getting the program for free, but they have to undertake to respect the order of the lessons and teach every single one, because it's the repetition. You see, a neuro pathway could be formed. I mean, we're born with empathy. There's no question that we're born with a natural tendency to empathy. You put two children in babies, strangers in a room together, stranger babies, the one will cry, the other one will cry in sympathy. So we're born with that. But if we don't exercise and practice that empathy, it's going to be pared away, because that's how the brain works. Those neural connections that are not repeated through experience, but we are repeating them in the classroom. So whatever the parents try and do, that child's brain is going to be pro-social, not anti-social. They will watch their parents and know that what their parents is doing is not right or not preferable. They will try to teach their parents. And I swear to you, we've seen so many instances of this, of teachers telling us that parents have come running into school saying, that thing with the colors that my child is talking about, you know, my child came home today, said, Mummy, you are in the blue zone, and you have to talk about it. Children are teaching their parents. Now, of course, they're not going to get very far. I have to be realistic about this, but still, it will stick, and it does stick. We treat children as agents of social change, and it's working.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you for answering that question as
Again,
well. So thank you for that. I think that's all the time we have. Unfortunately, I wish we could. I wish we could have more time, but you know we have. And there are some other comments, but I'll share them. I'll share them with you anyway. I'll share the comments with you and a couple of important questions that you might be able to respond on later on. But in the meantime, Leslie, with your permission, may I go ahead and make that announcement?
I'm very excited for you to make that announcement. But before you do, I need to say something else, or I will be slaughtered by my people and my team. www.thinkequal.org. And in India, www.samanta.org. We do change the name. We're not interested in branding or building our organization. We're interested in reaching children. So in some countries, we rename ourselves because that's how the country would like it. Please go online. There are some free resources there. There's a beautiful book we've written with the World Health Organization called Rainbows and Windows about COVID. Sorry, Subbu, you know me, you can't shut me up. But I had to say that or I will be wrapped over the knuckles. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely, fair point. Fair point. So yes, here's a very special announcement that I'd like to make. Think Equal and Learning Curve are entering into a very strategic partnership to be able to bring early years social emotional learning to the state of Telangana to start with, and who knows where else we'll go. But certainly to the state of Telangana to start with. And over the next 3 years, the plan is to build out, implement, and scale this program across the entire state of Telangana. So there you have it. This partnership's coming together beautifully over the last few weeks, and I think Leslie, right from our first conversation, I think we resonated on so many levels, right? And so I'm absolutely thrilled at being able to announce this very strategic, very impactful, meaningful partnership between our organizations. And if you'd like to say something.
Chak de fate, mere pyare dost. I'm so excited by this. The potential of this partnership thrills me. It makes my days bright and happy. Thank you so much, Subbu and Gayatri, both of you from Learning Curve. I love you deeply. Thank you so much for the partnership.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Leslie, and thank you so much for that really I think really inspiring, I think is the word to use, right? And I think we just cannot afford to fail our future generation. It's as simple as that.
Absolutely. Not anymore.
We really need to do whatever it takes to ensure that they receive the right foundations, and not just the right foundations as we know it, the right foundations as is important for them. And I think that's the view that we need to take. So thank you for bringing that to all of us today. We love you, and thank you so much for that. Fantastic.
Thank you too.